Cut off my dad and his wife to honor my late mom, and now they won't stop showing up at my place. So, yeah, this whole mess started back when I was 14. My mom passed away from cancer, and we were really close. We did everything together, cooked, watched movies, and talked about all kinds of stuff. She was just the kind of person that made everything feel better, you know? So when she passed, my entire world fell apart. It was like everything just went silent. And my dad, Robert, he was practically a ghost, emotionally absent and totally shut off. I get that people grieve in different ways, but he was moving on so fast that it made my head spin. I'm not trying to be overdramatic, but it seemed like he was over it in just a few months. By month 3, he started seeing Laura. I say seeing because I'm pretty sure they were already together before Mom passed. I don't have solid proof, but the way they acted around each other, even while Mom was still sick, was just weird. I'd hear them chatting and laughing late at night in the kitchen while Mom was barely hanging on upstairs. It never sat right with me. It felt like he'd already moved on from us before she even left. Anyway, within 4 months, Laura was staying over almost every night. I didn't even have time to process my grief, let alone figure out why this random woman was suddenly living with us. Dad seemed desperate to move on, and I hated it. Laura would show up acting all friendly, trying to chit-chat with me and making breakfast like she was already part of the family. All I kept thinking was, who does she think she is? Lady, I don't even know you. But here's the real kicker. No joke. This is what really got to me. They announced their engagement on my 15th birthday. Yeah, my birthday. Imagine me just sitting there trying to get through the day, and then bam, they hit me with, "We have something exciting to share." I barely had time to process it. Dad's grinning like an idiot, and Laura's all, "We're getting married." I honestly can't even remember what I thought in that moment. I just got up, grabbed the cake they'd made for me, and dumped it on the floor. Frosting went everywhere. It was the only way I could show how furious I was at that moment. I walked out and didn't come back for 3 days. They had the nerve to act surprised when I took off. They seriously didn't get why I was upset. I mean, really? Announcing your engagement to a woman you've been dating for a few months on my birthday? Less than a year after my mom died? That's messed up, right? Anyway, after being gone for a few days and staying at a friend's place, I finally had to come back. I think they were about to report me missing or something. The cops were probably about to knock on my door, so I figured it was time to face the music. When I got back, they acted like nothing happened, like we were just going to brush it all under the rug and move on. But nothing was the same for me. It only got worse. They started erasing every trace of my mom from the house. I mean everything. Her pictures, her clothes, even little things like the mug she used to drink from. One day I came home from school, and it was like she'd never been there. I lost it when I saw all her stuff gone. I ran up to my room and found they'd packed away the few things of hers that I still had left. Some of her personal items just vanished, and when I asked where they were, Laura had the audacity to say something like, "It's time to move on." Move on? Are you kidding me? It hadn't even been a year since she died, and they expected me to just erase her memory. I fought them hard on this one. I managed to save what I could, some of her jewelry, a few hidden photos, and letters she'd written me when I was a kid. Everything else was either trashed or stored away somewhere I couldn't get to. Then came the call her mom stuff. Oh man, that's what really pushed me over the edge. Laura and Robert kept trying to get me to call her mom, like that was something I was just going to start doing out of nowhere. I was not having it. I made it crystal clear that she was not and would never be my mother. But they wouldn't let up. Every time I called her by her first name, Robert would flip out. He'd go off on these long tirades about family unity and how I was disrespecting them by not acknowledging Laura as my mom. I wasn't disrespecting anyone. I was just trying to hold on to the one piece of my real mom I had left. Laura started introducing herself as Jack's mother whenever we were out in public, which was so embarrassing. I'd immediately correct her, saying something like, "No, she's not my mom." It got awkward real fast, but she just ignored me. They acted like I was just some angsty teenager lashing out for no reason. But really, I was just trying to preserve the memory of the woman who actually raised me. By the time I was 16, the tension was so thick in the house that you could cut it with a knife. I went 2 weeks without saying a single word to either of them. I locked myself in my room, stayed out late, and pretty much pretended they didn't exist. Robert broke first. He came up to me trying to smooth things over, saying all he wanted was for us to be a family. But it didn't feel genuine. He wasn't listening to why I was hurt. He just wanted the house to be quiet again. When I turned 18, I was out of there, off to college, and I was done with them. I kept contact to a minimum, only checking in when absolutely necessary. It wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about protecting myself. I couldn't stand the fake family act. They weren't even trying to push anymore. But of course, they weren't done with me. Definitely not. So, when I turned 18 and left for college, I thought I was finally free of the chaos at home. I could finally breathe. No more twisted family dynamics. No more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. It felt like I was finally starting a new chapter. But of course, the peace didn't last long. I kept in minimal contact with my dad and Laura, just a few texts here and there, maybe a call on a holiday if I was feeling generous. But Laura especially didn't like it. She'd send these long messages like she was guilt-tripping me for not being more involved. She'd write stuff like, "We miss you so much. It's not the same without you." But it always felt like she just wanted to keep me under control, you know? Less about missing me and more about preserving her picture-perfect family image. Once, she even sent a cringeworthy text that said, "I know you're busy, but I'm still your mom and always here for you." Still your mom? I literally threw my phone down when I read it. Like, how many times do I have to tell this woman she's not my mom? I ignored it, but the messages didn't stop. Every time she reached out, it was like she was trying to force herself into a role that didn't exist. It was exhausting. Fast forward to when I met Sarah, my fiancée. We met during my second year of college, and things moved fast between us. She's honestly the best thing that ever happened to me. She understood right away that I had issues with my dad and Laura, and she was super supportive. She respected my boundaries, never pushed me to reconnect, and just let me deal with things at my own pace. So when we got engaged, I knew I had to tell my dad. I didn't want to, but I figured it was better if he heard it from me than through someone else. I gave him the news, and as expected, he did not take it well. He contacted me soon away, acting startled, like, "Why didn't you tell us you were dating someone?" I informed him that my personal life was none of their concern and that I didn't feel compelled to bring them up to date on anything. He hung up on me, and I figured that was it. Of course it wasn't. A few days later, Laura did what she does best, make it all about herself. She wrote a lengthy, over-the-top remark on Facebook about how thrilled she was that her son was getting married. She said a lot about how excited she was to be a grandmother and how proud she was of me for meeting someone as great as Sarah. She even shared a photo of us that she apparently obtained, despite the fact that I had never given her any images. I was infuriated. Not only did she have the guts to refer to herself as my mother again, but she also pretended to be involved in my life and relationship. So I responded on the page something like, "Just to be clear, I am not your son, and you will not be a grandmother to any of my children." I don't believe I've ever pressed the post button quicker in my life. And guess what? That's when the real drama began. My father phoned me completely enraged. He was ranting about how rude I was, how I embarrassed Laura in front of her friends, how I had disrespected my mother. I couldn't believe what he was saying. I simply sat there, clutching the phone, wondering if he remembered that my mother died when I was 14. So I asked him straight up, "Who are we talking about? My mother has been dead for over a decade. You mean Laura, correct? Because she isn't and never will be my mother." That silenced him for a second. Then he went on to talk about family and how we're all meant to stick together and forgive one another, and so on. Honestly, I was done listening at that time. I told him I didn't want to speak with him or Laura anymore and hung up. That was around 3 years ago. Following that, we entered complete no-contact mode. No calls, messages, or emails. They seemed to disappear from my life, which was a relief. I felt like I could finally breathe without them continually attempting to force a connection that didn't exist. I didn't expect them to try to get back into my life after all that. I was mistaken. So fast forward to present. Sarah is almost 8 months pregnant, and we're preparing everything for the baby. We've set up the nursery, picked out names, and are simply enjoying our time together. And suddenly, out of nowhere, they arrive at my residence. Yeah, comma, you read that correctly. My father and Laura somehow discovered where I reside. I never provided them my address, and they simply came up one day, banging on my door as if everything was normal. I was shocked. I hadn't spoken with them in 3 years, and they believed it was fine to just drop by unexpectedly. I did not even open the door at first. I simply gazed at them through the crowd, wondering what the heck they were thinking. I eventually opened the door, but did not let them in. I inquired what they wanted, and Laura started talking about how much they missed me and how they wanted to reestablish our connection before the baby was born. She had this phony smile on her face the entire time, as if she really thought I'd accept them back into my life after everything that had transpired. I told them to go. I did not shout or anything, just politely stated that you must go. But they did not move. My father tried to talk to me, claiming they only wanted to meet Sarah and be a part of the baby's life. I slammed the door on their faces. I wasn't about to allow them back in after what they did, but this is the worst part. They did not grasp the hint. A few days later, I learned that they had purchased a property 5 minutes away from where I lived. Yes, they literally relocated to my city, just down the street, to be closer to me and the baby Dot. At this point, it's not only bothersome, but also disturbing. They believe they can just push their way back into my life as if they had a right to a connection with me and my family. Sarah and I discussed it, and we're both terrified out. I'm not sure what their issue is, but it's evident they're not going to back down lightly. My therapist wants me to let them in to repair bridges or whatever, but I'm not sure I can do it. Not after all they've done. After learning that my father and Laura had purchased a house just 5 minutes away, I believed things couldn't get worse. But of course, I underestimated them. They always find a way to boost the odd factor. So, about a week after they relocated, I received a notice on my phone. It is from Facebook. I'm not as active on social media as I once was, but I do have an account to remain in touch with some old college pals. Anyway, Laura tagged me in another post. My immediate instinct was to roll my eyes while pondering, here we go again. I assumed it would be more of her regular talk about family or how much she misses me, but this time she went completely mad. The post was a lengthy essay on how thrilled she was to be reunited with her son and how she can't wait to help raise her grandchild, There was also a photo of their new home with the comment, "A fresh start for our family." Throughout the post, she continued calling herself Mom, despite the fact that she is not one. There were also some images of myself from my childhood. I have no idea where she got those. They weren't on my Facebook, and I never sent her those photos. I quote M, talking about newborn pictures, school photos, and other things I haven't looked at in years. The comments were also crazy. Her friends were hyping her up, saying things like, "Oh, it's so beautiful that you're reconnecting with your son, and you're going to be such a great grandma." Laura. It was like a huge, diluted love fest. I was just sitting there gazing at my phone, confused, and Sarah was sitting next to me on the sofa, so I showed her the post. Her face changed from confused to angry in approximately 5 seconds. She said, "What the hell is this? How is she sharing all of this without speaking to us?" I did not have an answer. I didn't know where to start. I was already pissed off, but seeing Sarah so unhappy made everything worse. This wasn't only about me anymore. It was about our family. Laura, our baby, was pushing every imaginable limit, and my father, he was nowhere to be found, but I knew he was enabling it all. So I did what I always do when I'm angry. I left a remark. It wasn't long or complicated, simply straight to the point. "I'm not sure where you obtained these images, but I never handed them to you. You are not my mother, and you will not be engaged in my child's life." Simple, right? Simply a factual statement. I assumed that would be the end of it, but it really made things worse. Laura erased my comment within minutes. Then she sent me a lengthy, guilt-inducing DM about how hurtful I was, how I needed to mature, and how she was only wanting to rebuild our family for the sake of the kid. She went on and on about how I was pushing her away for no reason, how I was being unkind to my father, and how this was going to harm the baby in the long term. She even finished with something like, "I'm doing this for your child's future, Jack. Don't you want them to have a caring family?" I gazed at the message for about a minute before blocking her, as if this woman's arrogance was unbelievable. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years, and she still believed she had the right to influence how I raised my child. It was frustrating, but that wasn't the end of it. Shortly after I blocked her, my father phoned. Of course, he had to get involved. He walked off saying I was being ridiculous. How? Laura only wanted to be a part of the family. How I needed to let go of the past and move forward. He stated the same things he has been saying for years. But this time it felt worse. He continued insisting that I was the problem and that if I simply accepted Laura as my mother, everything would be good. I lost it. I roared into the phone, something I had not done in a long time. I informed him that Laura would never be my mother, no matter how many properties they purchased near me or how many bogus social media postings she created. I informed him that this was the final straw, that I was done with both of them, and that if they continued to attempt to push their way into my life, there would be repercussions. He tried to play the victim as he often does, saying things like, "You're tearing this family apart, Jack. Can't you see how much Laura loves you?" That aggravated me even more. I am pulling this family apart. I haven't even been a member of the family in years. You ripped it apart when you let her move in and tried to replace Mom. He went silent for a moment. Then he said something that I will never forget. He claimed your mother was gone, Jack. Laura is here now. She is your family, and you must get accustomed to it. That was it for me. I hung up. I couldn't take any more of his nonsense. I was done trying to persuade him to see reason. If he wished to live in this false universe, where Laura was my mother, fine, but I wasn't going to take part in it. I returned to Sarah and told her everything. We sat there gazing at each other, trying to figure out how far things had gone. We decided that we needed to cut them off totally, with no communication whatsoever. It wasn't only about keeping ourselves safe anymore. It was about safeguarding our baby. I didn't want my child to grow up with these nasty individuals attempting to worm their way into our lives. But cutting them off wasn't going to be so simple. They were 5 minutes away. They knew where we lived. They had already started turning up unexpectedly, and now they were publishing photographs of me from my youth without my consent. It was evident that they would not stop until we took significant action. We chose to secure all of our social media accounts. We changed everything to private, unfriended anyone who may leak information to them, and instructed our close friends and family to keep things quiet. It was severe, but we didn't have an option. The following several days were stressful. Every time there was a knock on the door, my pulse raced, thinking it was them. We even purchased a security system to ensure they could not sneak up on us. Sarah was stressed out, which was harming her pregnancy. I felt terrible for bringing her into this, but I didn't know what else to do. Then, just as I thought things were calming down, we received another shocking news. So after all of the social media and cutting them off, I was hoping that they'd finally get the message and leave us alone. Sarah and I secured everything, blocked them everywhere, and even informed my in-laws about the situation in case they attempted to break in. Things were tight, but I felt certain that we had done the necessary efforts to keep them out of our life. But of course, they were not finished. I should have known better. It was Saturday morning, and Sarah and I were enjoying a peaceful breakfast. She was 8 months pregnant at the time, and we were simply trying to enjoy the peace before the chaos of becoming parents. Just lounging, drinking coffee, and talking about baby names. Everything was fine. For once, we felt at ease. Then there came a knock on the door. At first, I didn't think much about it. We were not expecting anyone. However, occasionally packages arrive early. Perhaps it was a neighbor or something. However, as I got up to check, my stomach fell. I knew somehow. I knew it was them. I peeked through the crowd, and there they were. My father and Laura standing on my front porch as if they hadn't been absent from my life for the past several weeks. My heart started thumping. They have no cause to be here. I had not invited them, and we had not spoken. They weren't meant to be anywhere near us. I did not even open the door at first. I simply stood there, paralyzed, staring at them. Sarah called from the kitchen and asked who it was, so I instructed her to keep put. She could tell by the tone of my voice that something was awry. I could hear her getting up from the table, but I didn't want her to have to deal with this. She, quote, had enough tension, so I opened the door. Just a crack. enough to let them know I didn't intend to let them in. My father was the first to speak. "Jack, we need to discuss." I did not even react. I merely gazed at him, trying to resist the temptation to slam the door in his face again. Laura stood behind him, holding a present package. Like this was a casual visit rather than a total violation of my boundaries. "Why are you here?" I inquired, attempting to maintain a cool demeanor despite the fact that I was on the opposite side of my father, as if he were the one being inconvenienced. "We simply wanted to check on you and Sarah. We know the baby is due soon, and we wanted to be there for you. Be here for me? Are you kidding me? After all they'd done, including the contempt and manipulation. They wanted to act like a supportive family. I told you we were done," I said, trying to hold it together. "You have no right to be here. We do not want you involved." Laura went forward, holding out the present bag as if it would make things great. It quotes only a few items for the infant. "We want to assist. You do not need to push us away, Jack." I shook my head without even glancing at the bag. "Take it and leave. I do not want anything from you." Laura did what she normally does. She attempted to guilt-trip me. Her voice became quiet and she began with the waterworks. She said, "I just don't understand why you hate me so much. I have always tried to be there for you. I've always treated you like my own son." I nearly laughed. "You treated me like a son," I exclaimed, feeling my blood boil. "You attempted to eliminate my mother from our lives the moment you moved in. You attempted to replace her, and now you're pretending to be the ideal grandmother. You are deluded." My father came in at this moment, attempting to calm me down as if I were the one acting irrationally. "Jack, we are family. Families have disputes. However, this does not give you the right to ignore us. We are here because we care about you." I was not having it. I snapped, "You don't care about me. If you did, you would have respected my boundaries long ago. But no, it is always about what you and Laura desire. You cannot push your way back into my life just because it is convenient for you." Then I did what I should have done from the beginning. I told them to go for good this time. "I am done talking. You need to go and not return." Of course, they did not move. Laura began weeping more, and my father simply stood there, shaking his head, as if he couldn't believe I was the one being unreasonable. It was as if they were waiting for me to alter my mind. They seemed to think they could wear me down if they stood there long enough. I'd had enough. I slammed the door in their faces before locking it. I stayed there for a few seconds, trying to collect my breath. I could hear them conversing outside, but I didn't care what they were saying anymore. When I returned to the kitchen, Sarah was standing there, looking frightened. "Are they gone?" she asked. "Not yet, but they will," I responded, already taking out my phone. I phoned the cops. I wasn't playing around anymore. They'd crossed the line too many times, and this was the final straw. I informed the dispatcher that my estranged father and his wife were trespassing on my property and refused to leave. It wasn't long before I noticed the flashing lights approaching outside. I did not go out to chat to them again. I observed via the glass as the cops ordered them to leave. Laura attempted to argue with them, most likely stating something about how they were simply trying to see their kid, but the officers weren't having it. After a few minutes of back and forth, they received the message and departed. After they left, I felt a big sense of relief rush over me. It was not even about their leaving my home. It was about regaining control. For the first time in a long while, I felt as if I was doing something to safeguard my family. Later that night, Sarah and I met to chat. We both knew it wasn't over. My father and Laura were not the type of people to give up lightly, especially because they lived so close. We needed to find out what to do next, how to protect ourselves and the kid when they were born. We discussed getting a restraining order, but we understood it would be difficult to obtain without more actual evidence of them pestering us. Still, we were willing to investigate. I wasn't going to let them ruin the life Sarah and I were built. I didn't want my child to grow up among toxic individuals that attempt to influence them, like they did with me. I understood what I needed to do to keep my family safe, even if it meant permanently breaking off contact with my own father. After the cops instructed them to go, I hoped that this nightmare was finally ended. I mean, most people would back off if the cops were engaged, right? But neither my dad or Laura. They are too obstinate for that. Things were calm for a few days. Sarah and I were on edge, however, We realized that just because they were ordered to leave did not mean they would stop. I could feel it whenever the doorbell rang, or I received a notice from our security cameras. My heart would race. I despised the fact that I felt like a prisoner in my own home, waiting for the next thing they tried. Then, just when everything appeared to be calming down, I received a letter in the mail. It was from an attorney. Their attorney. I almost laughed when I opened it. I almost expected a restraining order, but nope. The letter requested mediation. Mediation? Are you serious? According to the letter, my father and Laura wanted to meet with me and Sarah to address our family problem in a peaceful and courteous manner. I could not believe it. They had the audacity to go via a lawyer to attempt to push us into a sit-down, as if we were on some horrible reality show. The lawyer's letter made it appear as if I was the problem, as if I had chopped them off for no cause, and now was the chance to make apologies. I showed Sarah the letter, and she merely shook her head. What do they think this is? Some sort of intervention? I suppose they hope they can get us to sit down with them. I said, but I'm not going to do that. We got down to chat about it. I wasn't about to yield into their demands. They didn't get to dictate how I lived my life, and they certainly weren't going to push me into some phony mediation session in which they could play victim. But we realized we couldn't simply disregard the letter. We needed to do things properly legally. So we consulted our own lawyer. I wanted to make sure that whatever we did, we had a solid strategy in place. Our lawyer said that we could not be forced to participate in mediation. It was only a request, and we had every right to deny. However, considering what had transpired thus far, he urged that we seek a restraining order. I was all for it. I intended to put an end to this once and for all. However, the procedure was not easy. Restraining orders are not simply handed out. We needed documentation that they were bothering us, and the police visit was helpful. But it wasn't enough by itself. That's when our lawyer proposed something that made my skin crawl. He suggested we let them make another move. He didn't mean something hazardous, just anything that would demonstrate a clear pattern of harassment. I despised the notion. I didn't want to hang around waiting for them to show up again. But that was the greatest option we had for getting the restraining order in place. And like clockwork, they did not disappoint. About a week later, Sarah and I were in the process of preparing the nursery. We were putting up decorations and sorting baby clothing when the doorbell rang. My heart fell. I recognized who it was before I even glanced at the camera. Sure enough, my father and Laura were there at the front entrance bearing additional gifts. I could not believe it. After everything had transpired, they resumed their normal behavior. I grabbed my phone, about to call the cops again, when Sarah stopped me. "Let us document this," she urged. "Our lawyer requires additional evidence, correct?" This is it. I hated that she was correct. I did not want to deal with them anymore, but we needed to manage this properly. So I opened the door just enough to allow the camera to capture everything, but not enough to allow them in. "What do you want?" I asked. I held my voice as steady as I could. Naturally, my father talked first. "Jack, we just wanted to drop over some items for the baby. We hoped we could chat. Clear the air." When I saw the mound of gifts in his arms, my blood started to boil. I said, "I don't want anything from you. I asked you to leave us alone." Laura plunged in, attempting to perform her normal dance. "We aren't trying to cause issues. We just want to be a part of your life. You cannot keep pushing us away, Jack." "Yes, I can," I fired back. "And I will. You are not a part of my life. You are not involved in Sarah's life, and you are definitely not going to be a part of my children's lives." My dad's cheeks turned crimson. He was attempting to remain composed, but I could see he was agitated. "You are being unreasonable, Jack. We are your family." "No, you are not." I spoke, aware of the weight of my words. "My family is in this house. My family consists of Sarah and our kid. You are merely folks I used to know." Laura started weeping again, but I wasn't bothered. I was done feeling guilty. I'm done feeling like I have to repair everything. They pushed and pushed until they got what they deserved. Nothing. "I'm going to call the cops," I said, taking out my phone. "You need to go right now." They did not argue this time. My father murmured something under his breath before they turned around and went. I stood there watching them go back to their car, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control again. We emailed the film to our lawyer, who confirmed that it was exactly what we needed. Within a few days, we had completed the paperwork and filed the restraining order. It was not a quick fix, but it was a start in the right direction. Finally, I discovered something crucial. It wasn't simply about keeping myself safe from them, it was about safeguarding my family. Sarah, our kid. They were my first focus right now. My father and Laura could keep playing their games, but they weren't going to pull us into their mess longer. The restraining order would not keep them away forever, but at least we had the law on our side. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing the right thing for me. For Sarah and the baby we were expecting. I'm not sure what they'll do next, but whatever it is, we'll be prepared. And this time, I'm not backing down. Story 2. I caught stepdad taking my wedding dress for his daughter. He grabbed it and booted me out of the home. Growing up, it was just my mother and me. After my father died shortly after my birth, my family formed a close-knit group to face the world together. His passing left us not only emotionally devastated, but also financially stressed. Regardless of the suffering. My mother never contemplated parting with her bridal attire. My father had fashioned a magnificent handcrafted gown just for her. It wasn't simply silk and lace for us. It represented my father's affection and a tie to their lives before I was born. Fast forward to the present, and things have changed significantly after my mother remarried. Brad has 2 children, Tessa, 26, and Jake, 18. We've gotten along quite well, though it's been a challenge to balance our families. Tessa recently got engaged, and while her forthcoming wedding should be cause for joy, it has really sparked a lot of underlying tensions. When Tessa expressed wanting to wear my mother's beloved wedding gown, I was taken away. She understood how important the clothing was to me and my mother, yet she still brought it up. My mother first refused since she had always promised to keep the garment for me. It signifies a promise, a link to my father, and a dream of mine to wear at my own wedding someday. Brad, on the other hand, appeared to believe it was a simple issue of pragmatism, implying that my mother now had 2 gowns and I could just wear one of them. His proposal that Tessa wear the original dress, despite its sentimental meaning to me, felt dismissive of both my sentiments and my father's memories. Brad personally removed the garment from storage and presented it to Tessa in front of me, which inflamed the situation. My reaction was instinctive. I took the garment from Tessa and shut myself in my room with it. This clothing represents a piece of my past, a connection to the father I never met, and I couldn't handle the notion of it being changed and worn by someone else, especially in these conditions. The fallout has been rather fierce. My mother is conflicted, attempting to mediate while also understanding why the outfit is so important to me. Brad, on the other hand, has been labeling me spoilt and selfish, accusing me of exaggeration. Tessa is also upset. She feels like her wedding preparations are getting thrown off. She has been contacting me to apologize and return the dress, but I feel misled and saddened by the entire affair. Now I feel like a villain in my own household, chastised for standing up for something with great emotional meaning. I believe I need to have a serious chat with my mother, just the 2 of us, to convey how significant this dress is to me, not only as a prospective wedding gown, but also as one of the few ties I have with my father. This debate must be held away from Brad's influence so that I may express myself honestly and plainly without being pressured. Furthermore, it is critical to create limits and communication norms with Brad and Tessa on issues that directly affect me. They must learn that their words and actions have serious emotional implications, and respect in our family dynamics is crucial. Seeking external support, such as a family therapist, may be beneficial. A neutral atmosphere might give a platform for all of us to voice our opinions and work out our differences, perhaps leading to greater understanding and respect among us. Navigating this will definitely be challenging, but I feel it is critical to protect the things that are really important to me. My connection to my father's memories through this clothing is invaluable, and standing firm here is as much about preserving that relationship as it is about setting the tone for how I expect to be treated in my family moving forward. So, am I not the idiot? Now, for the top comments before the change, you shouldn't apologize at all. You did not do anything wrong. Your mother has told you for years that the dress is for you to wear when you marry, and that she would wear a new dress once she marries Brad so that his daughter may wear it. So why does she need to wear your dress? And honestly, if I were your mother, I would be considering divorce. Your mother's new husband is a bully, and his adult daughter is the pampered, selfish brat in this story of Tessa. She only wants a lovely outfit. And as far as Brad is concerned, Tessa should have what she wants, regardless of what his wife, the dress's owner, desires. No stepbrother has seen this happen frequently in the past. As a result, he is supportive of you. The fact that the brand is pressuring your mother into doing something she does not want to do is a really poor indicator. Tessa has asked me to apologize and return the outfit. While it cannot be returned, it never was hers. Brad snatched it despite your mother's protests, and you regained it before anybody could conclude that it was all right. Brad is really grateful to you and your mother. Apologies. And Tessa may go pounce and slip the dress out to someone you trust to keep it safe for you. Your mother needs to take the initiative here and tell them no. Following the initial disagreement about the wedding outfit, Brad and Tessa chose to double down on their stance in a way that really surprised me, in the worst manner. Brad decided that now that my mother had wedded him, everything she had, including the outfit, belonged to the family. And Tessa, as a member of this family, had every right to wear it. His rationale was that keeping the dress solely for me was unjust to Tessa, who had never had a special dress. Tessa, encouraged by Brad's backing, went a step farther. She went on a rant about how I was greedy and foolish for wanting to retain the garment for myself. She said that because I was still single and not even close to getting married, the dress was merely collecting dust and that it would be more sensible for her to wear it now. She even mentioned that I might never get to wear it, which was a nasty blow. The tipping point occurred when Brad grabbed the garment from where my mother had hidden it and presented it directly to Tessa, directly in front of me. He felt it was time to move on from the past and make sensible decisions for the family's benefit. I could not believe it, the arrogance. I took Tessa's dress and locked myself in my room with it, acting entirely on impulse. This outfit is more than simply cloth. It's my link to my father, a man I never knew. It was unacceptable to see it treated as if it were simply another piece of clothes to be passed about. The aftermath was explosive. Brad slammed on my door, accusing me of being spoilt and pulling the family apart over an old cloth. My mother attempted to mediate, but she was distraught at seeing her family like way. She continued telling us we needed to speak things out gently, but calm was out of the question by then. Tessa was weeping and playing the victim, telling everyone who would listen that I had ruined her wedding. She has been contacting me incessantly, attempting to guilt-trip me into giving up the dress, claiming I don't understand what it's like to want a perfect wedding. As if I didn't have feelings. The environment at home has become quite poisonous. Brad treats me like I'm the enemy, while Tessa acts as if she's the only one who counts. I feel like I'm being ganged up on for trying to save something special from my history. I am starting to believe that this isn't just about the dress anymore. It is about respect and understanding, or a complete lack thereof. I need to have a serious conversation with my mom about this. We need to find out how to live with Brad and Tessa if they're going to be so entitled and oblivious to things that matter to me. Perhaps it's time to seek outside assistance, such as a family therapist, because this is well beyond what we can handle on our own. I'm standing firm not only for the dress, but for what it symbolizes: respect, memories, and my father's legacy. I will not let that go without a struggle. So after all the turmoil with the wedding dress, things got even weirder. Brad eventually lost patience with me because I refused to hand over the outfit to Tessa. His final comments were, "If you can't follow the rules of this house, you should find another place to stay." So he basically kicked me out. I was outside with my belongings and nowhere to go. Feeling completely disoriented and disturbed up, I went to the only place I thought I could go, my grandfather's house. When I arrived to Grandpa's doorway with all of my belongings, he was shocked but very friendly. He helped me carry in my things, and then we sat down and I told him everything about the outfit, Brad, Tessa, and how everything suddenly burst. Grandpa listened to everything without interrupting, which was just what I needed once I was finished. Grandpa remained quiet for a moment, then stated he had something very important to tell me. Something about my father. It turns out my father wrote a while before he died. And get this, he left the home to me. Yes, the same house Brad just threw me out of, according to the will. It was supposed to be mine once I reached 18. I was just blown away. I mean, how could something that significant have never occurred? Grandpa mentioned that my father was really concerned about my well-being, that I had something substantial to my name in case things became rough. However, once my mother married Brad, this significant information was swept under the rug. Why did my mother never mention this? I had no idea. And that made me feel both angry and sad. With this shocking news, Grandpa and I began making arrangements. We spent a lot of time discussing what to do next. It seemed like a detective movie, pulling together clues from ancient papers to figure out our next move. Grandpa advised we consult with a lawyer to determine how we might go about claiming the house. It turns out we have a good case, and if all goes well, I might be able to reclaim the house in my name. Living with Grandpa for the past several days has been a game changer. It's peaceful here, away from the drama. It has given me room to reflect and sift out my emotions. Every morning, we eat for breakfast together, and Dad tells me tales about my father, things I never knew. I feel like I'm bonding with my father in ways I didn't thought were possible. But it's not just about relaxing and conversing. We're actually quite busy meeting with attorneys and dealing through all of the legal paperwork. It's a little daunting, but Grandpa is a rock, guiding me through it all. Throughout it all, I kept thinking about the outfit. He is the one who began it all. It's no longer merely cloth. It symbolizes everything I'm fighting for. My father's memory, my rights, and my future. Who knew a wedding gown could represent so much? So that concludes the revision from here. From being booted out to realizing I may own a property. It has been a crazy trip. There will be a lot of difficult times ahead, but I have Grandpa's support, and I'm feeling prepared to face anything comes my way. Here's hope for justice and peace soon. Remember how Grandpa and I were preparing to battle for the house that my father gave me in his will? Well, during our first significant meeting with the lawyer, he dropped this whole surprise on us. There is a second, more current will that no one informed us about. Yes, a second will do. So we are sitting there. My grandpa and I were really astonished. The second will was not an easy modification or something small. Nope. It was laden with big news and strong directions that completely altered the game. First and foremost, it proved that I was going to obtain the home when I reached 18, as the first will said. But that is not all. This would also cover certain investments and a sizable chunk of money that my father had saved for me to aid with education or anything I needed to start my adult life, right? Here's the kicker. No one ever mentioned this to me. Not Mom. Definitely not Brad. But here's the truly crazy part. The will included a specific provision. It said that if I was not informed of this will before my 18th birthday, there would be heavy penalties for whomever concealed it from me. It was as if my father anticipated something may go wrong and was putting up a safety net from beyond the grave. It, quote, "is strange to believe he was protecting me like way even when he couldn't be present." When we heard out about all of this, our lawyer went into high gear. He began pushing the case ahead, hoping to reclaim not just the home, but also everything else my father had planned for me. Imagine how fast things heated up. Mom was quite stunned when she learned about the second will. She appeared to have seen a ghost as the lawyer described everything to her. She kept stating, "I had no idea there was another will." Brad, however, did not experience the same shock. Instead, he became defensive, as if he were prepared to fight. This only made things between us much colder. Just when I thought that was enough drama for one lifetime. Tesla threw another surprise in the mix. After keeping a low profile for the most part, she abruptly exploded at Brad during a family meeting intended to find a peaceful solution. She accused him of manipulating everyone, particularly his mother, and attempting to control situations over which he had no authority. It was like watching a soap drama, yelling and wailing the entire time. Now that all of these claims and secrets have been revealed, I'm left with a large mountain of questions to go through. Who actually know about the will? Why was this concealed from me? It's a lot to manage, and some days it feels completely overwhelming. but knowing that I'm battling for what my father wants for me gives me the motivation to keep going. Throughout all of this chaos, living with my grandfather has provided me with a safe haven. Every evening we sit down and speak about everything, including our future moves, how to deal with family dysfunction, and sometimes simply memories of my father. It helps a lot to have him here with me. This whole situation has escalated into far more than simply a fight over a house or a garment. It's about fighting for justice for my father's final wishes and perhaps learning the truth about what's been going on behind my back in my own family for years. So that's where things stand. This roller coaster looks to be far from ending, and frankly, I'm bracing myself for further twists and turns. Who knows what will happen next? Stay tuned, because it appears like this tale is just going to get crazier from here. So I was sitting with our lawyer, looking over some of my father's assets and documentation. Yes, the same ones he left for me that no one informed me about. We're talking about investing, savings, and other such topics which are interspersed with dull bank statements. I observed something quite strange. There were several payments made to this business, which is well known for staging extravagant parties. Curious, I conducted a little research. Guess what? That firm was in charge of planning Tesla's impending highly costly wedding. Here, quote, the kicker. The money for all of this came from my inheritance. Yep. My money was surreptitiously used to support Tesla's ideal wedding. Nobody asked me. No one mentioned that they were utilizing my finances. I was beyond furious. I felt as if someone had hit me in the gut after everything, the sneaking about with the dress and the family drama. Now there was this. My money, which was intended to be saved for the future, was being spent on Tessa's wedding without my approval. I needed to find some answers and knew precisely where to start. I found Mom in the kitchen and wasted no time. This is how our chat went. Me? Mom, why is Tessa's wedding planner being paid with money from my inheritance? Mom was definitely taken off surprise, stumbling with her words. We figured that would be an excellent approach to handle the finances. How do I handle the funds? Really, Mom? By wasting my money without informing me? Mom, this was meant to be a surprise. We hoped it would help bring the family together. What will you use to create something beautiful? Your father has left me a surprise. Using my inheritance for Tessa's wedding isn't a pleasant surprise, Mom. It is a betrayal. How could you decide to do this without even speaking with me? Mom, I know it looks horrible right now, but we were going to tell you someday. We assumed you'd understand after seeing how pleased everyone was, especially Tessa. Understand? How am I expected to understand your use of my fortune behind my back? It's not all about the money, Mom. It is about trust. And right now, I don't trust you at all. Mom, I really apologize. We basically got carried away with the wedding preparations. I assumed you'd be fine with it now that you and Tessa are getting along better. Just because we get along does not mean you may use the money my father left for me to pay for her wedding. It was intended to be for my future mother, not Tessa's wedding. Mom, you are correct, and I'm very sorry. We just wanted to do something nice for Tessa, and we felt this would be okay. Please, let us attempt to resolve this together. The discourse didn't improve much from there. Mom continued trying to make things better, but I was too hurt. Knowing she had gone behind my back in this way felt like a deep wound. It's one thing to have conflicts with Brad or even Tessa, but I feel deceived by my own mother. That's a whole new level of pain. Now I have to find out not just how to manage the legal issues around the property and inheritance, but also how to handle my relationship with my mother. It's as if each layer of this problem reveals more chaos beneath. I'm trying to keep my head up and deal with this, but it's difficult. Every interaction feels like a minefield, and every decision feels incredibly hefty. But I will not back down. I'm going to make it clear to everyone that my inheritance isn't a free-for-all, and I'm going to establish boundaries that should have existed from the beginning, so that's the most recent. Just when you think you've reached the conclusion of the drama, a whole new twist awaits you. Stay tuned. Because, honestly, at this point, anything is possible. After finding all of the sly details about my inheritance being spent for Tessa's wedding, I reached my limit. I mean, it's enough, right? So I decided it was time to take decisive action and regain control of my home and life. First things first, I sat down with our lawyer to ensure that everything was clear. Legally, the house was mine under my father's last will and testament. Armed with this information, I convened a large family gathering at my place. I informed Brad, Tessa, and Jake that they had 2 weeks to locate a new home to live. Yes, I did tell them they needed to move out. It felt odd. It was difficult, but essential. When I dropped this surprise, you can imagine the house erupted in a fury of yelling and arguing. Mom was quite unhappy with me. She couldn't believe I was throwing out Brad and his children. She continued saying things like, "How do you do this? They are family, and this is not what your father would have preferred." But with everything going on, it seemed like they hadn't been acting like family at all. Here, quote, a little more about my tough talk with my mom. This is me, Mom. Brad, Tessa, and Jake have 2 weeks to move out. This is the house that was legally given to me, and I need to start taking charge of it. Mom, but they are your family. How can you simply throw them out? Me. It's not about tossing them out, Mom. It is about making things right. They have been living here, and Brad has been handling my money without my permission, spending it to pay for Tessa's wedding. That's not correct, Mama. However, they will be kicked out. Is not that a little harsh? Me? Maybe. It may appear harsh, Mom, but I need to start making some big decisions. I've been pushed around and taken advantage of, and this has to end. Mom, I cannot believe this is happening. Brad has accomplished so much for us. Me? I know you think Brad has been helpful, but he has not been truthful. I need to do this, Mom. I need you to understand why, Mom. I only wish there was another way to address this. Me? I thought about it a lot, and this is the only way I can see to set things right. Grandpa will now assist me handle my money. He's the only one I trust right now. Things became somewhat heated in the house following that chat. Mom was silent, and Brad was extremely angry. Tessa and Jake said little, but I could see they were stunned. It was a difficult couple of weeks seeing them pack up and relocate, but it also felt like I was finally regaining control of my life at home. The home is quieter now, and it seems more like mine than it has in the past. It's odd, but yet quite tranquil. I've spent a lot of time with Grandpa preparing how to handle the funds and prevent something like this from happening again. He's been fantastic, teaching me a lot about money management and making sound judgments. This entire thing has been quite challenging. It's difficult to make decisions that offend others, especially your own family. But sometimes you have to fight for what is right and what is yours. I am learning that it is acceptable to put my foot down and say enough is enough. So that's where things stand today. Many changes. I'm making some huge decisions and beginning a new chapter in my life. I quote, hoping that with some peace and quiet and with Grandpa's guidance, I'll be able to begin to recover from all of this turmoil and maybe even rebuild some bridges if feasible. Thank you for staying with me during this crazy. I'm not sure what comes next, but I'm prepared to confront it with a clearer head and a better understanding of who I am and what I stand for. Let us see what the future brings. After all the commotion with the home and discovering that my fortune was secretly paying Tessa's wedding, I knew something had to be done. It wasn't only about the money. It was about sticking up for myself and letting everyone know I wasn't someone they could simply push about. So, even after Brad, Tessa, and Jake had moved out, there was still the enormous issue of Tessa's wedding expenditures depleting a portion of my fortune. Yes, the gourmet catering, the opulent setting, you name it, my inheritance covers it. Not cool, right? I thought it was time to set my foot down. I was not going to let this slip. So I lined up a time to talk to Brad in person. I needed him to understand I was serious. And this wasn't going to be another debate that left me feeling bullied. Here, quote, how everything went down. I'm Brad. We need to talk about the money you spent on my inheritance for Tessa's wedding. That was the money left to me by my father. Brad, you had no right to use it without first asking. Look, I understand you're unhappy, but we were simply trying to plan a wonderful wedding for Tessa. We did not aim to upset you. Me? It's more than simply being unhappy, Brad. It is about what is correct and incorrect. The money was mine, and utilizing it without my consent. That is not only incorrect, it is treachery. Brad, I got it now, and I am sorry it came to this. We should have handled things differently. Me? Sorry doesn't make it better, Brad. I need that money back. I put a lot of faith in you, and it was broken. Now I need to make things right. Brad, what are you asking me? I want the entire sum paid for the wedding refunded to me. I'll give you 1 week to resolve this, or I'll have to take legal action. I do not want to do it, but I will if necessary. Brad, that is reasonable. Give me 1 week. I'll ensure that you receive your money back. To be honest, I was expecting him to make excuses or drag his feet, but something in my tone must have conveyed that I wasn't kidding around this time. And guess what? He truly accomplished it. Brad repaid every single dime stolen from my inheritance for the wedding, all inside a week. I was astonished, but also relieved. It seemed like a major win, not just for my financial situation, but also for my spirituality, getting the money back. It seemed like I could finally breathe a sigh of relief. It was affirmation that I had done the right thing by advocating for myself, and it taught me a crucial lesson about setting boundaries and not allowing anyone, including family, to trample all over them. Since then, I've been working closely with Grandpa to get all of my finances in order. He's been an absolute rock star, teaching me how to handle my money, invest intelligently, and prepare for the future. We're developing some comprehensive financial strategies, and I'm learning a lot. It's quite wonderful to feel so confident about my financial condition. The house is quieter today, yet it seems more like a home than it did before. I quote, "We've been spending my evenings relaxing, occasionally remembering about happy moments with Dad and considering what he would want for me. It provided me with much-needed calm and closure." So that's the major patch. Thank you so much for staying with me through the ups and downs. Your support means everything to me, and it has helped me get through some difficult times. Here, quote, hope things continue to improve from here. I can't wait to see what the future brings, and I'll keep you all informed. Hello, everyone. So it feels like we've finally reached the conclusion of a very long, twisting roller coaster journey that has been my life for the past several months. A lot has transpired, and I believe things are settling into what may be the new normal for me. Since my last report, Brad has really returned all of the money he used for Tessa's wedding. I've got some time to breathe and reflect about things. Getting that money back was a great triumph, and it paved the way for some serious healing and figuring out my future steps. First and foremost, the home has been quite quiet. Like the type of stillness that allows you to hear your own thoughts a little too clearly. But this solitude has given me the space I needed to process all that has transpired. Not just the great dramas of inheritance and wedding, but also the small moments and decisions that lead up to those events. I've spent a lot of time discussing things with Grandpa. He's been fantastic throughout this, like a wise old magician who always knows just what to say. We spoke a lot about money and how to manage it effectively, sure, but we also spoke about personal issues, such as the need of setting clear boundaries and how to deal with difficult familial situations, talking about family. Things have been complicated. Mom and I have begun conversing again. It felt quite weird at first. Imagine attempting to talk casually with a large elephant in the room reminding you of recent battles. But we both know that if we want to restore our relationship, we must have these difficult discussions. We've been carefully delving into why things happened the way they did, how we both felt deceived at times, and how we might improve moving ahead. It is not easy, and I doubt that things will return to normal. But we're trying. That is the key thing. Brad has apologized several times, claiming that he believed he was doing the right thing. I'm still processing those sentiments since forgiving is difficult. It's like attempting to disentangle a super knotted rope. Tessa and I have not chatted much. I believe we both need some space from one another to unwind. Jake has been the most approachable of the group. He seemed to get caught in the crossfire, and he's very relaxed about moving on now. Looking ahead, I have a few plans. The house is now mine, and my finances are looking much better owing to Grandpa's wizard-like assistance. I quote, thinking about what comes next. Maybe I will return to school or start my own business. Something that truly feels like mine, and on which I can develop positively. I'm also concentrating a lot on personal development. All of this turmoil has taught me so much about myself and my ability to be strong. It taught me the significance of sticking up for myself and not allowing others to push me about. Yeah, it's been really difficult, but I feel like I've emerged stronger on the other side. I can't end this post without thanking everyone for their comments, texts, and simply being there. Reading and supporting me has helped me get through some incredibly difficult times. It's like having a large, invisible squad cheering me on, and I can't express how much it means to me. Story 3. My wife and daughter abandoned me while I was unwell. Years later, they returned to take over my home. But let's start from the beginning. Initially, I was diagnosed with advanced Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was startling. I had always been an active person who ate a nutritious diet and made it to my annual doctor's visits on time. The physician noted that the particular causes of the malignancy remained unknown. Despite the small likelihood of survival with intensive chemotherapy, I was resolved to fight for my life after being diagnosed. I sat down with my 15-year-old wife, Desi, and our teenage daughter, Luna, to tell the news. They were understandably distraught, but I told them that I would do everything I could to tackle the cancer. However, I couldn't help but be concerned about how this might impact our family relationships. The doctor had warned me that chemotherapy would be taxing and that many marriages do not survive such treatments. Later that night, I discussed my worries with my wife. She promised to be by my side throughout my illness and to do everything she could to help me. We were financially secure due to my good insurance, significant savings, and a trust fund for my late grandpa. Our house was completely paid off, and I had saved money for Luna's college education in case something happened to me. A week later, I started chemotherapy, which was quite stressful. I arrived home very exhausted, like if I had been hit by a freight train. I could hardly feed myself, let alone do simple things like bathe or walk. My wife and daughter jumped in to assist me, taking care of meals, housekeeping, transporting me to chemo sessions, and making sure my medications were filled. I tried not to strain them too much and did my best when I had the energy. This lasted 2 excruciating months. However, I began to sense tension in my wife and kid. Every time I begged for their help, they were more hesitant. Even my daughter stopped reacting when I asked for anything as simple as a drink of water or assistance getting some fresh air. Things reached a breaking point when I had an early chemo appointment. One day, I noticed I was getting late, and my wife hadn't yet emerged from her room. I phoned to check on her, and she just advised I take an Uber to the hospital since she was weary. Her remark stunned me, but I didn't know what else to do. I hired an Uber and also phoned the hospital for help because my wife would not be there to support me. Fortunately, my Uber driver was extremely courteous and ensured that I arrived safely to the hospital. She even offered to drive me home after the therapy. I felt appreciative, but having to rely on others' charity was frustrating. When I got home that day, the situation had taken a bad turn. After a few hours of relaxation, I found the confidence to face my wife and daughter about their recent actions. I'd noticed a noticeable coolness in their behavior recently, which was getting increasingly impossible to ignore. I questioned whether they thought I had become a burden to them. My wife, with a heavy sigh, stated that they were overwhelmed. My daughter reluctantly confessed that she had not anticipated me to be so needy and demanding throughout my sickness. I felt it was time to consider potential solutions. To make things simpler, I recommended employing a nurse who could come in a few days a week to help me with everyday activities and drive me to my chemotherapy appointments. To my relief, I purchased a wheelchair in anticipation of the day when I would be too feeble to walk or even speak. They agreed to the suggestion. I asked the hospital for suggestions, and they sent me a nurse who was both nice and severe. She made sure I never missed a treatment visit, that my medicine arrived on time, and that I had a detailed care plan that included nutritious meals. Everything appeared to be better, and the physicians were delighted with my development. However, despite my attempts to alleviate their load, my wife and daughter did not appear satisfied. My wife, in particular, began to feel as if the nurse had replaced her. I proposed that if she was prepared to take on the tasks of driving me to chemo, filling prescriptions, and making sure I ate and took my medication on time, we could split ways with the nurse. The only reason I had a nurse was that I had become too much for my wife to handle, and she grudgingly accepted this compromise. She asked if we could locate a male nurse instead, but I told her that none were on the hospital's approved list. The nurse we had was picked for her expertise working with cancer patients and her awareness of my special requirements. She was careful, attentive, and showed great respect for both my wife and kid. I made it plain that the nurse would only be replaced if my wife and daughter were prepared to assume her tasks. My wife was not thrilled with this approach and said that I should do more for myself rather than make my condition someone else's concern. I attempted to argue with her, saying that there were days when I couldn't even lift my head, let alone stand up. The treatment had taken a heavy toll on my health. In a frenzy of wrath, she went upstairs and slammed doors. I opted to ignore her rage, knowing that her negativity would only slow my recuperation. My primary emphasis was my health and well-being. Later that night, I received a call from my mother-in-law, who lives 2 states away. She voiced her anger that I had brought another lady into her daughter's home. Technically, the house was in my name because I owned it before to our marriage, but I chose the high road. I calmly mentioned that I needed assistance, which surpassed what her daughter was ready to supply. As a result, I had to hire a nurse to relieve my family's stress. I underlined that the nurse's stay would be temporary, lasting just the period of my final month of treatment, assuming the cancer did not continue or progress. She wasn't completely convinced, but she finally left me alone, which was all I needed for about a week. Things appeared to be back to normal following that talk. My therapy progressed nicely. Then, one fateful day upon returning after a chemotherapy treatment, I was met with a moving truck parked in front of my home. My wife and daughter had packed up their possessions and informed me that they would be staying at their mother's apartment. I was genuinely wounded and upset, but tiredness prevented me from expressing my emotions adequately. My wife's leaving immediately following my treatment sessions, when she knew I'd be exhausted and unable to speak effectively, felt cruel. In quest of clarity, I went to my daughter and inquired whether this was really what she wanted. After all, she was old enough to make her own choices. Her remark struck me hard. She claimed she would rather live with her mother since she found living with me too stressful. It was a horrible experience to see them go, with tears welling up in my eyes. It was exactly what I had anticipated when my chemotherapy began, feeling undesired and abandoned in the midst of my mental struggle. My brother stepped in and offered a solution. He spotted the nurse spending extra time with me that day and asked whether I had any family members nearby who might offer assistance. My brother lived 3 hours away and had 2 young children of his own, but he graciously agreed to take time off work to be with me until I could find a more permanent solution. When he came, he was outraged with what my wife had done. He referred to her as greedy and ungrateful, noting that she had never had to work since our marriage, and I had always made sure she had everything she needed. My brother's time off from work was restricted to 1 week, but he had another option. His wife, Sister Kara, was going through a difficult divorce and needed a secure place to stay temporarily. Her soon-to-be ex-husband had been the breadwinner, leaving her with few financial means. Kara was also pursuing radiology at a local institution on scholarship. My property was conveniently located near the university campus, making it a perfect choice. I'd have someone in the house in case of an emergency, and she'd have a safe haven away from her volatile, soon-to-be ex-husband. I consented to the idea, assuring my brother that Kara would not have to pay rent because she would already be living with me. She could select which bedroom she chose. I did not mind. My wife and daughter had removed nearly everything, leaving only the bed and a few clothing. My brother stayed for the remainder of the week, and Kara came on his final day. He helped her move in, and she thanked me for allowing her to remain with me. Kara pledged to be kind, clean up after herself, and assist as required. She was truly kind-hearted. I explained to her that she wouldn't have to do anything because my nurse will now be available 7 days a week instead of 4. I said goodbye to my brother and helped Kara settle in as much as I could. In the weeks that followed, everything went rather well. I missed my wife and kid, but it looked that I was the only one who felt this way since they didn't even phone or check in. Kara's presence proved to be really beneficial. During this period, she did the majority of the cleaning, went food shopping, and even helped with dinner preparation. She never made a single complaint. About a month and a half after my wife left, I learned that I was cancer-free, which I celebrated by ringing the hospital bell. My nurse asked what I wanted to do next. Now that I was essentially cured, I decided to apply for a unilateral divorce, free myself from a marriage that has been unsupportive during my difficult path. With the divorce processes underway, I focused on the next critical stage in my cancer recovery. It was an adventure in itself. I slowly began to restore my strength. My hair has grown back, my scar began to heal, and I started gaining weight. I mostly maintained to my healthy food schedule, but I did allow myself several cheat days to enjoy the favorite dishes I had missed while sick. It has been 6 months since I was proclaimed cancer-free, and I think I am now ready to go on with my life. I called my former employment, and they are eager to rehire me for remote work if I decide to return. I guess I'll accept their offer because I'm planning on moving away. While I am attached to my residence, there are too many sad memories here. I want for a new beginning with something smaller. My wife doesn't know it yet, but I want to give Kara the house. She was there for me when I was at my lowest, demonstrating enormous compassion. Even though we were almost strangers, she is free to sell it if she chooses. I don't want anything to do with it anymore, especially if it means my wife or daughter may claim it. My new home is in a peaceful area in the countryside, and I'm looking forward to the fresh beginning. Hello, wife and daughter, update number 1. It's been almost a year since my original diagnosis, and I've settled into my new home and area wonderfully. There are many kind people around here, and I've become friends with my neighbors, especially Sophia, who lives across the street. She, quote, a widow who lives alone with her children spread around the nation, only returning for Christmas and her birthday. Sophia asked me to her porch for drinks and chat, and she told me the terrible story of losing her husband to lung cancer. She underlined how crucial life insurance was to her family's financial stability. During our talk, I told you about what occurred with my wife and kid. Surprisingly, I still hadn't heard from them, but I've accepted it. I've been pursuing new interests, mainly carpentry, and I'm starting to acquire tools. When I returned from the hardware shop, Sophia informed me that she had spotted several strangers lingering about my house. Fortunately, they did not cause any harm or steal anything, but they did approach the door, knock many times, stroll about the home, and ultimately wait in their car. Sophia pondered phoning the sheriff's office, but opted against it since she suspected they could be related. I asked her to describe them, and she accurately described my wife and kid. I couldn't understand how they had discovered my new address, as only my brother and his wife knew my present address. It made me wonder why they were hunting for me after I had departed over a year ago. Without looking back, Sophia had promised me that if they returned, I should not come out because she would manage the matter. Frankly, I didn't want to contact with them after they abandoned me when I was at my lowest. Later that night, I phoned my brother, who told me that my wife and daughter had been harassing Kara and her roommate at my previous residence. Fortunately, Kara had written documentation that the home was now in her name, and she had said that she had purchased it for me. A wise decision on her part. I felt horrible that Kara had to go through this trauma due of my family, so I contacted her and apologized. Hopefully, the next time they come by, I'll be able to finally address the matter. I, quote, am not sure if my wife is aware of the unilateral use of force. My lawyer forwarded a copy to her mother's address, although it's conceivable they misunderstood it for junk mail. Regardless, I've reached the stage where I don't care. She and I are not together anymore. Update 2. My wife and kid arrived at the house again, but this time earlier in the day while I was working. I heard the knock and decided to check the security cameras, which confirmed it was them. My ex-wife looked just like I remembered her, but Luna had grown tremendously. She was almost a young lady now. I followed the plan. Sophia and I had debated staying inside but going closer to the door so we could hear them more clearly. Sophia, the kind neighbor, came over to welcome them and introduce herself. My wife inquired whether she knew a man named Charlie who used to reside there. Sophia seemed as perplexed as I was, questioning her usage of used to. My wife said that her husband, not ex-husband, had resided in this residence until his tragic death after a lengthy hospital stay. My mouth dropped at this news because, to my knowledge, there was no record of my death anywhere, especially at the hospital where I was treated. My wife went on to say that they were next of kin, hinting that the house was rightly theirs. Sophia told them that someone named Charlie had lived there for a while, but that he was a divorcee. She also mentioned that during our time as neighbors, I told her that my wife had left me and that I had filed for a unilateral divorce. Sophia added that, as far as she understood, I wanted to leave all of my assets to charity because I had no other relatives than my brother. This is why she was surprised to discover 2 ladies snooping about my residence. The conversation lapsed into an awkward pause until Sophia asked if they had a death certificate, to which they answered in the negative. Sophia stated that after they obtained the paperwork, they could take them to the county records office. If they were indeed the lawful proprietors of the land, they might then have the deed in their name. My wife did not like this proposal. She asked Sophia who she thought she was and began yelling, claiming that Sophia had no power to intervene in her affairs, was nosy, and should mind her own business. I felt so embarrassed. The residents in this area had been nothing but nice to me, and now my ex-wife was causing a disturbance and upsetting their tranquility. A part of me wanted to confront her, but I opted to keep to our plan. Sophia, bless her heart. She apologized to them and stated that she was only trying to be helpful. She returned to her own house, and my ex-wife and daughter soon left. After finishing my duties, I walked over to Sophia's apartment to apologize. She waved it aside, saying that while she considered my wife's conduct repugnant, she also found the outburst entertaining. I could agree with her, but I knew my wife might become agitated when unhappy. If she ever returns, I plan to confront her and beg her to leave me alone. She returned again yesterday. I was sitting in my home office when I heard a huge crash from the living room. My front glass had been shattered, and people were yelling outside. I suspected there may be a madman on the loose, and it turns out I wasn't completely mistaken. That was my ex-wife. She had busted my glass, and my neighbors were outside attempting to stop her. She had apparently been making a racket for quite some time. But I hadn't noticed because I was working quietly with my noise-canceling headphones on. Frankly, I wouldn't have heard her if I hadn't passed the microphone for a break. When I walked outdoors, two of my elderly neighbors were doing their best to keep my actions from inflicting further harm. Both she and Luna were wielding bats, and they had already smashed a number of my potted plants. I grabbed her arm and inquired if she'd lost her marbles. She was obviously astonished to see me, or rather to see me alive. I told her and my children to leave my property before calling the cops. Unbeknownst to me, my neighbors had already made the call. She appeared to be wounded by my statements and inquired as to why I had not called her after I had recovered. She claimed that she and Luna would have returned. I informed her that when we married, we promised to stand by one another in sickness and health. She then betrayed her vows. I wanted nothing to do with her anymore. She is no longer my wife. I sent the divorce papers some months ago. I asked her again to leave. Then she inquired about our daughter, mentioning that she would be attending college next year, but cannot pay her own tuition. I responded that your daughter was all right with abandoning me, and I am willing to hand up all of my parenting rights to you. You should have thought about it before abandoning me. I do not want anything to do with any of you. After hearing that, she became enraged, labeling me selfish and uncaring, which I thought humorous given the circumstances. You are the last person who should label somebody selfish. I yelled back, calling her an entitled jerk and making it obvious that she would never receive another cent from me. Then she swung at me with a bat just as the cops arrived. They quickly seized her and my daughter. They asked whether I wanted to file charges, and of course I did. My own daughter began screaming loudly as they were loaded into the back of the police car, but I had little pity for them. I had recorded everything that transpired, including my wife shattering the window, and had previously turned it over to the police. After work, I purchased a replacement window and cleaned the glass. Someone will come to deal with it tomorrow, but for the time being, a makeshift tarp keeps the elements out. Sophia offered me some buckets to keep my plants in until I can replace their pots. I looked into what had brought my ex-wife back. It turns out her mother died 2 months earlier, and they discovered that the house they were residing in did not belong to her or her husband. It belonged to his cousin, The cousin decided to evict them because he wanted to sell it, with both of my ex-wife's parents being deceased. She and our daughter had sold most of their parents' stuff and had been staying in a hotel for a time. When they returned to our old house and saw Kara, they believed I had died and started looking for records of my assets and purchases, which is how they discovered me. Regardless, they're charged with vandalism, attempted break-in, and attempted assault. Since Luna is a minor, she is doing community service while my ex-wife is facing jail time because this was plainly premeditated. I'm considering getting a restraining order as well. At least I won't have to worry about her for a long time. Update 1. 6 months had gone since my wife Desi and daughter Luna unexpectedly left me when I was battling Hodgkin's disease. My health had greatly improved, and I was starting to discover a new rhythm in my life, filled with a renewed appreciation for the calmer times. Just when I thought everything had settled down, a stunning revelation ruined everything. It started with an unexpected visit from a lawyer whom I had never met before. He introduced himself as Desi and Luna's representative and handed me a stack of paperwork. As I read through them, my heart sunk. They were bringing a legal action against me, claiming that I had forged paperwork to illegally transfer ownership of our home completely to my name during my sickness. The claims were ridiculous and false. Desi was well aware that the house was already in my name prior to our marriage. However, they say that changes were made to our home's deed that barred them from any ownership or inheritance rights, which were allegedly done during my treatment. Furious and perplexed, I phoned my attorney to discuss the charges. Further inquiry revealed that someone had attempted to fabricate paperwork to make it look that I had made alterations to the deed while I was unwell. The forgeries were amateurish, but the motive was obvious. They were attempting to frame me for their own profit. The timing of their assertion seemed very questionable. It coincided with the news of my recuperation, which had significantly improved my outlook. It seems that they wanted to use my early bad condition, prognosis for sympathy, and the court to force through their bogus claim. I was sad, but determined to fight back. My lawyer promptly acquired all of the relevant paperwork and proof to prove the house's ownership history and the legitimacy of the original deed. We were also prepared to sue them for slander and mental anguish caused by their behavior. The court date came, and the stress in the air was evident. Desi and Luna were present, looking defiant but plainly scared as the procedures began. It was obvious that their argument was weak. My legal team offered convincing evidence of their fraud. The court was firm, probing them about their motivations and the inconsistencies in their account. Luna burst into tears and confessed halfway through, overwhelmed by the stress. She acknowledged that Desi came up with the idea to fake the paperwork. Desi attempted to intercede, but the damage had already been done. The courtroom was stunned, and the judge called a recess. Following the hiatus, their attorney resigned from the lawsuit, alleging ethical issues. Desi and Luna suddenly lacked representation. Their scheme is crumbling quickly. The judge rejected their accusations against me and proceeded to consider the countersuit. Finally, the court found in my favor, rejecting the bogus claim and giving me damages for the agony they put me through. Desi and Luna were also ordered to pay restitution for legal fees incurred while leaving the courthouse. Desi averted my sight, but Luna lingered. She approached me, tears in her eyes, and apologized for everything. It was an example of sheer emotional honesty. She admits to being misled by her mother and expressed sorry for the grief they had caused. Despite the turmoil they caused in my life, seeing Luna's real guilt elicited sympathy rather than wrath. I told her I forgive her, expecting that it would be a start toward healing for both of us. Now, months later, I look back on those stressful days with a combination of sadness and relief. The home remains mine, a haven of seclusion and rehabilitation. I've learned the hard way that sometimes people closest to you may do the greatest harm. However, this event has taught me about resilience and forgiveness, which I aim to carry forward as I work to rebuild my life in peace. Update 2. Since the court verdict, life has fallen into a pattern of quiet healing and introspection. My health gradually improved, and I felt stronger every day, both physically and mentally. The court triumph provided a sense of finality, but it also left me resentful at Desi and sorry for Luna, whose I imagined was caught up in her mother's plans. The house, now unquestionably mine, began to seem more like a sanctuary than ever before. I spent my days renovating areas of the garden and my evenings reading or listening to music, savoring the peace that had become so unusual in recent years. Despite this newfound tranquility, I couldn't shake the sense of solitude. The betrayal had left a deep scar, making the concept of trust much more intimidating than before. One late afternoon, While trimming some overgrown plants, I spotted a car I didn't know slowly passing by my house. It hesitated momentarily before driving away. This occurred several times throughout the next week. My first impression was that maybe they were just lost tourists, but the repetition made me uncomfortable. Then one calm Saturday, while I sipped coffee on my veranda, the identical automobile pulled up in front of my house. A woman of my age got out and nervously approached my gate. She introduced herself as Elise. She was a private investigator hired by someone claiming to have an interest in the property. My heart fell just when I believed the arguments were done. A new difficulty emerged. Elise was professional and direct. She stated that she had been engaged by a distant relative of mine, who believed they had inherited the house through an old family will. This was a shock. I understood my family tree well, and no one could have a genuine claim unless my late grandpa left an undiscovered will, something that looked quite implausible. Elise asked for permission to see whatever documentation I had concerning the property, and the family agreed. Despite my reservations, I consented, expecting to clear up any misconceptions swiftly. Over the following 2 days, Elise and I sifted through decades of documents, finding nothing to corroborate her client's allegation. However, as our sessions progressed, we became more intimate, sharing tales about our lives and our experiences with betrayal and trust. Unexpectedly, I like her company. Her presence infused the house with new vitality, and for the first time in a long time, I eagerly anticipated visitors. It was a gradual and natural evolution from professional meetings to coffee breaks that lasted into the afternoons. After weeks of futile inquiry, Elise determined that the claim was unfounded. She believed her client had been misled by incorrect information. She promised to resolve the issue and advised them to abandon the complaint. I felt tremendous relief after that was addressed. But it also meant that Elise would no longer have a cause to come. On what we both anticipated would be her final visit, I summoned the bravery to ask whether she wanted to continue seeing each other, not for professional reasons, but personally. To my delight, she grinned and concurred, admitting that she had hoped for the same. As our bond grew, so did my connection to life beyond my garden boundaries. Elise exposed me to new experiences and, more significantly, taught me that trust can be restored even from the wreckage of the past. Today, as I think on this trip, I am grateful for the unexpected turns life has led me on. Desi and Luna's betrayal was a hard chapter, but it helped me develop and start over. Elise and I are arranging a trip together next month, which will be the first step toward a future I never believed conceivable.